So hello everyone, welcome back to the course. In this particular presentation, you will be looking into the aspects of protection, goals of protection, and concept of access matrix, access control list. So I am Mrs. Archana Pradeshni, Assistant Professor in the Department of Information Science, Canada Engineering College. So what you'll be studying here in this presentation is the goals of protection, principles of protection and domain of protection, access matrix, implementation of access matrix, access control, revocation of access control, and finally the capability based systems. So the main objectives there are to identify the goals and principles of protection, and also the second objective covers as to how the protection domains combined with the access matrix can be used to specify the resources a process may access. So third objective is to examine the capability kind of protection systems. So as see, protection refers to the mechanism for controlling the access to programs, processes, and also uses. So why this? What this mechanism does is it provides a means for specification of the controls to be imposed. And as the computer systems they progress in technologies, they need to protect their integrity also. So protection can be used must be used majorly in multi-programming operating systems. So they must also provide good reliability. So protection can improve the reliability by detecting the errors at the interfaces between the component subsystems. And the role, see, early detection of errors means it can prevent any healthy system from malfunctioning, right? And the role of protection in a computer system is to basically provide the mechanisms for how the policies can be enforced. And again, these policies can be established in many ways, like some are fixed in the design of the system, and still others will be defined by the individual users as to how to protect the files and programs. So but there is a lot of protection problem, that is how to ensure that each object is accessed correctly, and it is how to ensure that it is only those processes that are to be allowed to use the system. Okay, in one protection model, you may have the system consisting of the collection of objects, hardware or software, and each object will have a unique name which will be having certain constraints in this access. So there is a guiding principle. This principle of least privilege can be used, and here programs, users, and systems should be given just enough privileges to perform their task. And this kind of privilege or this privilege, it limits the damage if the entity has a bug. Okay, so that restriction is very important, because if the system has got any bugs or if it has got virus, and there are restrictions that will be imposed on those programs or users who make use of those kind of systems, and can be static, that is during the life of the system, and during the life of the process it will remain, or it can be dynamic, that is it can be changed by a process as and when needed based on some domain switching. So we are also going to discuss about domain of protection, what exactly it is. And there will be certain policy for resource usage, and for these reasons protection is no longer the designer main console or main concern of the designer of the operating system. So as we already know the difference between policy and mechanism, and we have seen the protection problem, that is to ensure each object is accessed correctly and only by those processes which are allowed. So there are certain mechanisms which identifies the authorized and unauthorized users. And there is a security policy which is a statement of what is and what is not allowed for the by the users or by the programs. And it's like a security mechanism which can be used as a part of the as a tool for enforcing the security policy. So in this principle actually means that giving a user account only those privileges which are essential to the user's work. Like for example, backup user does not need to install the software. Hence, the backup user has rights only to run the backup and backup related applications. So what is required for that user, only those privileges are given. So that is nothing but your principle of least privilege. So this ensuring least privilege requires identifying what the user's job is and determining the minimum set of privileges required to perform that job, and also restricting the user to a domain with those privileges. In general, the principle of least privilege states that a subject should be given only those privileges needed for it to complete with the task. Must also consider the grain aspects. Rough grain privilege management is easier and simpler, but least privilege can be done in large chunks. And fine grain management is more complex and more overhead, but more protective. That is a more privileged version of RBAC can be implemented to have more kind of access control, and the domain can be specific to the user or process or a particular procedure. So before we talk about the domain structure, in this domain structure we will be talking about domain of protection. As you know, computer system is a collection of processes and objects. By objects we mean both hardware objects and software objects. Hardware objects means CPU, memory segments, printers, disk. Okay, software objects can be any files or programs or semaphores. So each object will have a unique name and it differentiates from all other objects. So for example, CPU can only be executed on, and memory segments can be read and written. Okay, whereas CD-ROM or DVD-ROM can only be read. So process should be allowed to access only those resources for which it has authorization. So this at any time a process should be able to access only those resources that it currently requires to complete this task, that is referred to as need to know principle. And in this domain structure, to facilitate this kind of domain of protection, the process will operate in what is called as a protection domain. So which specifies what resources that the process will access. So each domain will have a list of objects and the type of operations. Okay, list of objects and types of operations. So in the first domain you have got 3 objects and the type of operations that can be performed. The ability to execute the operation on an object is called as a access right, and the domain is a collection of access right, and it's of ordered pair object name and right set. For example, a particular domain D has got access right, that is file F, which has got read write operation. So then the process executing this particular domain D can both read and write the file F. So in here we have got 3 set of domains D1, D2, D3. The access right O4, print is shared by both D2 and D3, implying that the process executing in either of these domains can print the object O4. So as you know, before stating about the domain implementation in Unix systems, so domain itself can be realized in a variety of ways. That is, the user may be a domain in which the domain switching Again, it's possible whenever a user has changed, and process itself may be a domain, wherein in that case the domain switching refers to one process sending a message and another process is trying to waiting for the response. And there will also be the case wherein a procedure may be also a domain, and in that case the set of objects that can be domain switching will refer to when a procedure call is made. But now if we study this Unix operating system, the domain is associated with the user. That means it refers to a user ID. So switching the domain corresponds to changing the user identification. So this is done through a file system. This is done basically through a file system, and the owner identification and the domain bit. Owner identification and the domain bit, which is not known as the setuid bit, will be associated with each file. And when a user ID, let's say A, is starts executing a particular file owned by B, whose domain bit is off, then the user ID of the process will be is set to A. So when the setuid bit is on, the user ID is set to that of the owner of the file B. So now because the setuid is off, even though it starts looking into the or executing the file owned by B, yet it refers to the user ID that is that of A, because setuid is off. But once the setuid bit is on, the user ID is nothing but the owner of that particular file. And there are other methods that change the domains. That is, in case of passwords. Okay, in case of passwords, it is also possible, and with the help of su command. With the help of su command, we can temporarily switch to another user domains when other domains passwords are provided. So there is one more alternative wherein the domain switching is possible through command, that is with the help of sudo command. Okay, changing the with certain set of specified commands. See, sudo command prefix executes specified command in any another domain. So in case of Unix system, the setuid bit, as you know, setuid bit on a networking program would be set, causing the user ID to change when the program is run. One problem with that method is if the user managed to create a file with the user ID called root and set UID bit as on, the user can become the root and can do anything. That is also possible. So alternative of this is to have some privileged programs. Let's say the operating system would be designed to change the user ID of a program like to root, and this will eliminate the set UID problem. So there are also more restrictive and protective methods that do not allow to change the user ID, and great care must be taken in writing all those kind of privileged programs. So here is the domain implementation of Multics system, and in the Multics system, so this is a ring-like structure with ring 0, ring 1, and ring n minus 1. So each ring they correspond to a single domain, and the rings are numbered from 0 to 7. So let's say di and dj be two domain rings, and if j is less than I, then di is a subset of dj. That is, a process executing domain dj has got more privileges than does a process executing in domain di, and a process executing in domain d0 has the most privileges. If only two rings exist, this scheme is equivalent to monitor user mode of execution. Monitor mode will be corresponding to D0 and user mode obviously will be corresponding to D1. So in this, if we explain still more about the domain switching in multics, so this occurs when a process crosses from one ring to another ring by calling a procedure. So in this multics system, as you know that there is a ring structure, and domain switching in this kind of system occurs when the process moves from one ring to another ring by calling the procedure. So obviously this switch must be done in a controlled manner, that is when a process can start executing in ring 0 and no protection will be provided, what to do? That is to allow some kind of control over this kind of domain switching. For that purpose, you have got some modifications which are implied over to ring field of the segment descriptor. As I mentioned, Multics has got a segmented address space, and each segment is like a file, and each segment will be associated with one of the rings. So what does this segment consist of is, it includes an entry which identifies the ring number. So for each ring there will be a segment description. So each segment description identifies the ring number. So in addition to that, it includes 3 access bits, that is to control reading, writing and execution. So let's say when a process is executing in ring I, it cannot access a segment associated with ring J, that is when J is less than I. So this kind of access restriction. For that we have got 3 fields, that is access bracket, limit and list of gates, which are implied, which are just a modification given to the ring field of the segment descriptor. And access bracket is, it consists of pair of integers b1 and b2, let's say, and wherein b1 is less than or equal to b2, and limit says the integer b3 such that b3 is greater than b2, so it's the highest limit. And the third kind of field that is included in the ring field is about list of gates, and this identifies the entry points at which the segments may be called. So if the process is executing in ring I calls a procedure with access bracket, let's say b1 b2, then the call is allowed only if b1 is less than or equal to I less than equal to b2, and the current ring number of the process will remain I itself. So let's see some of the benefits and limits. It is, first of all, the drawback of this is the ring structure, and it does not allow us to force the need to know principle. That is, if the object must be accessible in domain dj, object must be accessible if an object must be accessible in domain dj, but not accessible in domain di, then what we must have is j must be less than I. So which means that every segment accessible in di is also accessible in dj. So this kind of protection system obviously is more complex, and it is less efficient than are those used in the current operating systems. So if this kind of protection interferes with the ease of use, then obviously there is a decrease in the system performance. So there can be a similar protection system which can be preferred by implementing a kind of protection policy, and to separate the mechanism from policy. So let's see about access matrix. So what is this access matrix? So far we have seen about protection, domain, principles of protection, and how we have seen different systems that for perform the domain switching. So what is this access matrix? It is nothing but a model of protection which can be viewed abstractly as a matrix. So you can observe here, it's an access matrix, and there are certain set of domains and objects associated with it. So the rows of the access matrix, it represents the domains, and the columns represents the objects. So each entry in the matrix, it consists of the set of access rights. You can observe the access I, comma j defines the set of operations that a process executing in domain Di can invoke an object Oj. Okay, so here we have got how many domains? We have got four domains. And how many objects? Four objects: F1, F2, F3, and a printer. Three files and one printer. And when a process executes in domain D1, it can read files F1 and F3. A process that is executing in domain D4 will have the same privileges as in domain D1, but it has also one more privilege, that is write. You can write onto files F1 and F3. But the printer can be accessed only by process executing in domain D2. So this kind of access matrix scheme or access matrix policy, it provides us with a mechanism for specifying certain set of policy. And this access control matrix is easy to implement. It just contains rows and columns, and which represents domains and objects and particular kind of access rights. So this kind of access matrix works well for systems with a few files and few users. So the access matrix can also implement policy decisions concerning protection. So the policy decisions may involve which rights should be included in the ith, jth entry, and we must also decide the domain in which the process executes. So users normally decide the contents of the access matrix entries. Whenever a user creates a new object, let's say OJ, the column OJ is added to the access matrix with the initialization entries. The user may again decide to enter some rights in some entries in a particular column. So we can also restrict the control over the process and domains with the help of access matrix. So if a process in domain Di tries to do OP on an object OJ, then OP must be in the access matrix. So that entry must be specified in that particular access matrix. So user who creates object can define the access column for that object, and it can be expanded for to accomplish dynamic protection. The operation, you can have operations to delete and add the access rights, and also special access rights can be given to the owner of that particular object, and copy the OP from OI to OJ. Control, give certain controls, that is you can specify some modifications to can be done in the access rights, and also the transfer. So these are the different access special access rights which can be provided from between the these are the additional operations, that is copy, owner, control can be given. So the ability to copy and access rights from one domain of the access matrix to another will be denoted by asterisk, and the copyright allows copying of the access right only within the column for which the right is defined. And uh, we have got all these special rights apart from add and delete. So we can also change the content of the access matrix whenever we performing operation on the object, and we can also control the changes by including the access matrix itself as an object. So access matrix design, it separates the mechanism from policy. What is the mechanism? So mechanism states that the operating system provides access matrix along with the rules, and it ensures that the matrix is only manipulated by authorized agents and that rules are strictly enforced. The policy states that the user who dictates the policy and who can access what object and in what mode, that is defined in the policy. And but this mechanism and policy doesn't solve the general confinement problem. So you can see the access matrix of in this picture with the domains as objects. So in this, the process will be able to switch from one domain to another domain, and domain switching uh, from domain I to domain DJ is allowed to occur if and only if the access right switch it belongs to access of I comma j. So you can observe that a process executing domain D2 can switch to domain D3 or to domain D4, right? Object or a process executing in domain D2 can switch to domain D3 or domain D4, and a process in domain D4 can switch to domain D1, and the one in domain D1 can switch in to domain D2. So we have seen specific controls, that is add and delete, and also additional operations or access rights provided for the access matrix, which are copy, owner, and control, along with the transfer. And this represents the access matrix with the copyrights. So you can see the two variants, that is the right is copied from access ij to access kj. You can see the variations here, and the access matrix originally can is also modified in this version. Here you can see A and B versions. So the first version can be modified to the second version like this. So what is the change? Just observe the change where read and read. There's a difference in the version of read, wherein a write is copied from access ij to access kj, and it is then removed from access ij. So this action is a transfer of the write rather than copy. And second variant is that the propagation of copyright may be limited. That is, when the write R is copied from access ij to access kj, only the write R is created, and a process executing in domain dk cannot further copy the write R. So a system may select only one of the three copyrights, that is copy, transfer, and limited copy, and owner right controls all the operations. Let's say if access ij includes the owner right, okay, then a process executing in domain di can add and remove an entry in the particular column j. So there is another additional new rights, that is owner. Okay, you can have that owner. You can see them in the next slide. So basically this what it does is access right with copyright. It tells you about the copyrights. So the right R is copied from a particular access right, that is ij, which is referred in domain D2 of A version, to access kj, which is referred to domain D3 in the B version. Only the right R is created. You can see read is created in D3, and write is copied from access ij to access ik. It is then removed from access ij. That is, it will not be there in the first version, A version. And this action is like a transfer of write rather than copy. So there are two scheme variants. One wherein it transfers the write from access ij to access kj, and one wherein it just propagates the copyright. It just creates a copy of the write. So this is the access matrix with owner rights. So these are the additional new rights which can be seen apart from copy, transfer and limited copy. So the owner will control all these operations. So let's say you can observe in domain D1 owner execute. Okay, in domain D2 read owner write for file F3 in domain D2 of the first version A. So what happens in the first version A is that a domain D1 is the owner of the file F1 and can delete and add any valid write in the file F1 or in the column F1. Okay, similarly, domain D2 is also the owner of file F2 and F3 and can add and remove any valid write within these two columns. So this picture in the first version A can be modified to the access rights or access matrix shown in figure B. So what you can observe the changes, the execute is removed from D3 and write access is given to F2 and F3 files in domain D3, and also the domain D2 is given the owner permission for files F2 and F3 owner permission, which is already given in the previous version, but additional write is being given to file F2 and F3 in domain D2. So copy and the owner rights, it allows a process to change the entries in the column. So the control right is applicable only to the domain objects, and again you can observe this change in the next picture. So let's see this modified access matrix which is given here. In this there are four domains again, and this matrix each of the domains are mapped onto respective files. You can see that F1, F2, F3 are the three files along with the laser printer, and the objects are represented here as D1, D2, D3, D4 again. Okay, so you can see that in the when we map, see for domain D1 and file F1 there is read access, right, given in this access matrix table, and similarly for domain D1 and over to file F3 there is a read permission given to file F3 for domain D1, and then you observe the domains. So from D1 to D2 there can be a switch. Just observe the single row D1 and D2, there is a switch from D1 to D2. Similarly, there is a switch from D2 to D3 in the second row, and there is switch control. So this control right is it's a very important right, as you have seen. It allows to modify the permissions or any process which would execute in a particular domain could modify that particular domain into which the switch control is allowed. So here in domain D2 and in the column D4 there is a switch control, which means that the process executing in domain D2 could modify the domain D4. So just observe D2 and D4, there is a switch control. So any process executing in domain D2 could modify domain D4, and there is as we know that the copy and owner rights, they provide us with a mechanism in order to limit the propagation of access rights, but they do not give us appropriate tools for preventing that kind of propagation. So the problem of guaranteeing that no information held in object can migrate outside its environment is called as a confinement problem. So we can see this. And next, let's see about the implementation of access matrix. So first of all, how can the access matrix be implemented effectively? In general, the matrix will be sparse, that is, most of the entries will be empty, and although there will be sufficient data structure techniques to represent the sparse matrix, but they are not particularly useful. We have got a list of them. The first option is to have a global table. It then is then about capability list, and we can have the access list for the objects and the kind of locking mechanism. Okay, so uh, basically if we talk about the access control list, so what it is actually, access control list, it's also called as ACL. It's a modification of access control matrix, and it maintains a record of only those entries that specify the access rights. So access control matrix is implemented using these four methods. First is global table, and this global table, it consists of three parameters, which they are nothing but domain, object and right set. So it consists of three parameters in the entry in the table, and before performing any operation on object by a particular subject in the domain, the global table is search for all these triplets like domain, object and right set is search. So if this is found, the operation is performed, or else there would be an error. So uh, this implementation has got many drawbacks. That is, the table will be usually large and we cannot keep it in main memory. So it requires an additional input output that is needed. Because we should maintain all these order triplets, domain, object and right set for each of the processes. So it is very difficult to maintain such long table and for several processes. So additional IO is needed in this case. And the virtual memory techniques are often used for managing this table. So next kind of implementation of access matrix would be the access list for objects and also capability list for domains. So coming to the second implementation of access matrix, that is access list for objects. So as we know that the each column in the access matrix can be implemented as an access list for one object. So in access list, as I've told you, it's like a set of entries. It's a record of the entries which specify the access rights. Okay, and each column in the access matrix, as you have seen, specifies the access list for a particular object. And obviously, the entries can be emptied, entries can be discarded, and the resulting list will be the ordered pair, that is domain and rights set. So this will be the resulting per object list, which defines all the domains with non-empty set of access rights. So this approach can be extended easily to define the list plus the default set of access rights. So let's say when an operation M on an object OJ is attempted in domain DI. Okay, if we say an operation M on object OJ is attempted in domain DI, we search the access list for the particular object OJ, and if we have got an entry called DI, which is nothing but domain and right set RK, okay, with M belongs to RK, where M is nothing but the operation belongs to the right set. If it is there such entry, then we allow the operation to be performed, whatever is the operation M. Okay, and if it is not there, if that is if M is in the default set, obviously we allow the access, otherwise the access is denied and the condition is raised, exception condition. So this is what I mentioned of the previous access list for objects. So the each column is nothing equal to access control list for one object, and domain one it defines who can perform what operation. That is domain one, we have seen read write, domain two example read, domain three has got read operation. So each row is like has got a capability list. So this capability list for a domain, it's like a list of objects together with the operations which are allowed on that object. So capability list is like a key. So like for each domain we can have the certain set of operations which are allowed on the objects. Let's say we have got three files, file f1, f4 and f5. Okay, and the object f1 has got read operation. Okay, and object f4 has got read write and execute. Similarly object f5 has got read write delete and copy. So what is that capability list? Is that capability list for a domain is nothing but the list of objects with the operations which are allowed for that object. So the object is represented by the physical name or address, and that is called as a capability. So the third way of implementing this access matrix is the capability list for domains. So this kind of capability list is used for controlling the device and files. So as I mentioned, what is meant by capability? That is the object is represented by the name or address, and that is called as a capability. So capability can also be told as it is like a pointer or token which grants the privileges to the subject that possesses it. So it is implemented as a unique object identifier. So these capabilities will be granted to the subject which presents the token for all the subsequent access to the object. So the kind of token based and pointer based capabilities will be used in the system. And in case of pointer based capabilities, it simplify to the address at which the object is stored. And in case of token based capabilities, the capabilities are independent for the object's location in the memory. Okay, these capabilities were originally proposed as a kind of secure pointer in order to meet the need for resource protection that was seen in multi-program systems. So capable list, it is associated with the domain but never directly accessible by the domain. So rather protected object, it is maintained by the operating system and accessed indirectly. And it's like a secure pointer as I mentioned, and this idea can be extended up to applications. The fourth kind of mechanism is lock key mechanism. And this kind of the previous we have seen the previous kind of implementation, how the capabilities are implemented. It will be implemented with the operating system address space, and hardware may incorporate special support for these capabilities. So in case of this mechanism, that is lock key mechanism, lock is like a unique bit pattern for each object. Okay, it's a unique bit pattern for each object, and there are certain keys. What is the key? Each domain has got a list of unique bit patterns, and which are called keys. So whenever a block of memory is allocated to a process, the lock will be set to same as the process key, and the process key and memory locks can be set only when the system is in the supervisor mode. So as in the case of capable list, the list of keys for a domain must be managed by the operating system on behalf of the domain. So as you know, the value of the lock and key is same. Then if the value of lock and key is same, then only accessing of the object is allowed, and this kind of method is very simple to implement and is efficient at runtime. So comparison of the implementations. There are many trade-offs to consider. Before that, the access list, as you know, it corresponds directly to the needs of the user. So whenever user creates an object, she can specify which domains can access the object as well as what are the operations allowed. But because the access right information for a particular domain will not be localized, we need to determine the set of access rights for each domain, but that is quite difficult, right? So capability lists, they do not correspond directly to the needs of the user. They are useful, but however, localizing information for a given process is quite not that enough. So the process attempting any access, they must present a capability for that access in case of capability list. But this kind of capability list is useful for localizing information for a given process. This is the second mechanism that we've seen, and the first mechanism is about access list, and they correspond to the needs of user, whereas capabilities did not directly correspond to the need of the user. And here in capability list, the process must present a capability for that access. So in the next mechanism, that is lock-key mechanism, it is a compromise between the two schemes, and the mechanism will be both effective and flexible and depends on the length of the keys. So keys can be freely passed from domain to domain, and privileges can also be effectively revoked by changing some of the locks associated with the object. So most of the systems, they use the combination of access lists and capabilities. But when a process first tries to access an object, the access list is searched, and if the access is denied, an exception will occur. Otherwise, the capability will be created and it is attached to the process. So as you know, what is capability? That is an object represented by physical name and or address. So first access list is searched. Then if it's not found, it's not allowed, then capability is created for that which will be attached to the process. And additional references use the capability to demonstrate that access is allowed. So after the last access, the capability is destroyed, and we see this kind of strategy in multi-system. So next about the access control. So what is this access control? Uh, the key to the operating system security is to control the access to the internal data and resources. So access control, they do not provide access to the files, but it ensures that only certain users are permitted to do certain operations in the system. So as you know, we have got another kind of control, that is role based access control, which we have seen in which we'll be seeing in Solaris system. And in these environments, it is problematic to determine who the owner of the resource is. So in this kind of role based systems, the user will get specified roles based on the functions. Okay, user will have got certain privileges based on the functions in that system, and these systems are centrally administered. So there will be permissions which are assigned to the roles, and users are assigned to roles, and these roles are closely related to the concept of user groups in access control. So role brings together a set of users on one side and a set of permissions on the other side. So user assign roles granting access to the privileges and programs. So you can understand that the roles, they bind up the users and the permissions. So permissions will be assigned to roles, and user will be assigned to roles. Next is revocation of access rights. So revocation of access rights occurs as follows, that is, it may be delayed or immediate, or it may be temporary or permanent, or it may be selective versus general, and partial versus total. So in the first case, that is immediate versus delayed. So the question is whether revocation occurs immediately or whether it is delayed. So if the revocation is delayed, then can we find out when it will take place? That is the question that may arise. The second kind of revocation of access rights, that is selective versus general. So here we need to determine, as you know, it is maybe for the group of user or all those who are using that object, that is in general. So the question is, when the access right to the object is revoked, does it affect all the users, or does it affect to only the selective group of users whose access right would be revoked? So that is a possible question. In the third case, that is partial versus total, so this can be applied to the set of object that is partial or for this object as a total. So the question can be, can we have a subset of rights which is associated with the object be revoked, or can we revoke all the access rights for that particular object? It tells us whether only few access rights can be revoked or all the access rights can be revoked. So in the last category, that is temporary versus permanent, so it tells whether it can be applied temporarily or permanent. That is, can the access be revoked permanently, or can the access be revoked and later be obtained again? Okay, so within this access list scheme, revocation is easy, and the access list is searched for the access rights to be revoked, and they are deleted from the list. So revocation can be immediate, or it can be general or selective, it can be total or partial, and permanent or temporary. And the access list, we can also delete the access right from the access list. It's simple. You can it is simple to search the access list and remove the entry. It can follow in these manners that I have mentioned now. So here these capabilities, however, present much more difficult kind of revocation problem. And since the capabilities are distributed throughout the system, so we must find them before we can revoke them. So what are the schemes that implement this revocation? So this includes the reacquisition, back pointers, and indirection, followed by keys. So in the first scheme that implements revocation, we have got reacquisition. So periodically we know that capabilities will be deleted from each domain, and if a process wants to use the capability, it must find that capability. First of all, it may check whether the capability is available, or there are chances that the capability may be deleted, and the process may then try to reacquire the capability. So if the access has been revoked, the process surely will not be able to reacquire the capability. In the next option, that is back pointers, so there will be a list of pointers which will be maintained for each object, and this pointer points to all the capabilities associated with that object. So when the revocation is required, we can follow these pointers, changing the capabilities as necessary. So in the next, and this was used in multi system. The third kind of scheme is about indirection. So the capabilities may point indirectly and may not point directly to the objects. So each capability, it points to a unique entry in the global table. We have seen certain techniques, right? Global table also, and we have seen the entries patterns, how the global table maintains the allocation. There are three patterns which will be found for each global table, that is domain, right set, and we have got the object. So the each capability will point to the unique entry in the global table, which in turn points to the object. So when an access is attempted, the capability is found to point to illegal table entry in case if it is deleted. Okay, the table entries again can be reused for other capabilities, and the table entry, it contains the unique name of the object. For that, the object for the capability and the table entry must match. So this scheme was used in CAL kind of systems. So in general, the capability points to the global table entry, which again points to the object. So in this case of indirection, we implement revocation by searching the global table for the desired entry and then deleting it. So in case access is attempted, it will be found to be an illegal entry, and again table entries can be reused for other capabilities. That is, you are indirectly making it to point to some object by deleting that entry. Keys, in the next option, it is keys. The key, as you know, it is a unique bit pattern which can be associated with each capability. And this key is defined when the capability is created, and it cannot be either modified or nor inspected by the process. So there is a master key, and this master key will be associated with each object that is defined or replaced with a set key operation. So when the capability is created, the current value of the master key will be associated with the capability. And when the capability is exercised, its key is compared to the master key. So in case if there is a match, the operation is allowed to continue, otherwise there is an exception. So we can also have revocation that replaces the master key with the new value by the set key operation. And however, this scheme does not allow selective revocation since only one master key is associated with each object. Next kind of system is a capability based system, and we are taking the example of Hydra. So where Hydra was a capability based system, and it is a operating system kernel for CMMP computer system. So this Hydra allows users to build multiple file systems, command languages and schedulers. So where users can declare and other auxiliary rights and register those with the protection system. So accessing any process must hold the capability and know the name of the operation. So Hydra also provides write amplification, and this scheme allows certification of a procedure as trustworthy to act as a formal parameter of the specified type. So the rights will be held by the trustworthy procedure, and they are independent of the rights which are held by the calling process. So so in total there will be auxiliary rights and rights amplification. Auxiliary rights, it's like uh, they can be described in a capability for an instance of the type. For a process to perform any operation on the type object, the capability it holds for that object must contain the name of the operation being invoked among its auxiliary rights. So there are design decisions which permit the experimentation in Hydra, that is separation of policy and mechanism in the kernel, and the use of object-based model of computation with the capability protection. So totally Hydra supports right amplification, and this enables more privileged protection domain to perform an operation on behalf of the less privileged protection domain. And this the operations on objects defined procedurally, and it also solves the problem of mutually suspicious subsystems. So what are these? This problem is defined as follows: in case the program is provided which can be invoked as a service by number of different users, and when the users invoke the service program, they take the risk that the program will malfunction and will either damage the given data. Similarly, the service program may have some private files which should not be accessed directly by the calling user program. So Hydra provides mechanism for dealing with this problem, that is called as, and with the help of this problem, that is mutually suspicious subsystems. So there is a procedure called mechanism, and which was a direct solution to the problem of mutually suspicious subsystems. And the problem is, as I've stated now, that is the user will invoke the service program, and which take the risk that the program has already malfunctioned and will and it is sure that it is going to damage the given data or retain some access rights of the data to be used later. And similarly, the service program may have some private files that should not be accessed directly by the calling user program. For that, it provides some procedure called kind of mechanisms. So as you know, Hydra subsystem is built on top of the protection kernel and may require protection of its own components. A subsystem will interact with the kernel through calls on a set of kernel-defined primitives.